Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Shot. And today we're going to talk about Sri Lanka, where the Great Reset has hit with a vengeance like we have never seen before. And the Great Reset has hit my voice as well. Apologies for that. With me is Byron, and together we will detail how the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum has destroyed Sri Lanka, despite the best intentions of everyone involved, of course. Byron, hello, and welcome to Morning Shot. The most important part of this is, of course, the World Economic Forum published an article in 2018, written supposedly by the then Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, and the article basically says, if I can get to the correct one, how we will make Sri Lanka rich by 2025. Unfortunately, that article no longer exists on the World Economic Forum website, despite my best intentions in finding it. Oops.
Oh, I wonder why that is, huh? So the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka is a well-known, should we say, member and contributor. That's how they'd like to describe them,
Yes.
of the WEF, which basically means that it's an employee of Klaus Schwab's, the global dictator. So, also known as Justin Trudeau and Ordine's boss. So anyway, so the whole point is that. In typical fashion, he wrote an article that basically said that he was going to adopt all of the WEF's policies. All the great, lovely things that we've all been hearing great things about, like you'll own nothing and be happy. And, the
Hmm.
surveillance state will know everything about you. And whilst you'll have no privacy, it's okay because, you get to share a colander or something like that.
Yeah,
Yes,
but
that
also,
actually
also,
was
like,
a
Sri
material.
Lanka, like this middle third world country, needs to fight climate change, and they took that very
100%.
seriously.
100%. So it was the Green New Deals, it was renewable energies, it was sharing economy. If those guys had an idea, apparently Sri Lanka was going to be the poster child. So, the idea was meant to be that Sri Lanka would go, oh, look, we've adopted all this bull crap. They had a load of money thrown at them. And apparently it was going to be Klaus's way to stand up to the world and go, we took a third world shithole in the middle of Asia and we turned it into like the new utopia. So, what's stopping you, Britain or the US or wherever else, from adopting our brilliant policies? Like so,
You
but
can't do
apparently they
accents.
were, but apparently they weren't so brilliant. So,
Apparently they were not. So let's
nine.
go. Let's go through those policies, especially the green energy ones, which are the ones
Mm.
I'm most concerned about. Because according to Michael Schellenberger, who's a great writer on things like this, according to his Substack, the biggest problem with Sri Lanka was they banned chemical fertilizers in April of 2021, based on treaties with the West, the UN, and the WEF, and all the rest of it. Right?
which I
Um,
which I hate to interject, but
mm,
this is important right now, guys, because there are currently mass riots going on all around the world in large parts of Europe. There were obviously protests even in Australia. There's protests in Canada, and this is all because all these countries are all following the WEF bullcrap, and they're all trying to ban fertilizer and basically stop localized farming,
yeah.
all whilst obviously promoting Bill Gates's organic farming bull crap that he's promoting. So, you know, that's the way the dice rolls. But anyway, you can carry on, Ramon, because
Yeah.
that is important.
So basically, after they banned chemical fertilizers, as you can read on the screen, the numbers for agriculture were shocking.
Mm.
One third of Sri Lanka's farmlands have lain dormant since the fertilizer ban. Over 90% of Sri Lankan farmers used chemical fertilizers before they were banned. And after they were banned, 85% of those farmers experienced crop losses. The numbers
Correct.
are
Yeah.
shocking, as we well know. And Byron, I mean, just tell me, when you have something that everyone wants, like the demand is sky high, but the supply sort of craters. What happens to that commodity? It gets cheaper. No, no, no. Sorry, it gets much more expensive.
This is basically what we call the rules of supply and demand.
Yeah.
They were came up with by this lovely guy called Adam Smith, who used to be on the back of the £20 note. He was that influential to Western society. But it basically came up with the idea, which the ANC itself could learn, as the ANC's recently said. They don't want to have private sector energy generation because it will lead to a increase in the price of electricity. But that's actually not how free markets work. What free markets say is that when there's lots of people providing something, then people have to compete based on price, because that's how people buy. They buy based on price. And then they buy on service. So what it does is it increases the quality of the service whilst lowering the price, because lots of people compete to provide that. There's a limited number of people to sell it to, but there's almost an infinite capacity to create the product. So that's the way it works. So obviously, like Eskom, if you have a monopoly and they're the only one doing it, well, then they can really charge whatever they want and give you the crappiest service going, because where else are you going to go? And that's, I suppose, what's happened in Sri Lanka, is that with the number of crop failures, there's been less people actually producing food, which in respects means you've got more people wanting food, in
Yep.
which case the seller of food gets to charge a greater price. And if you don't like it, well, where are you going to go?
Well, in the case of Sri Lanka, they had to go overseas. So, for example, tea production in Sri Lanka generated, on average, $1.3 billion in
Mm.
exports annually. The tea export itself paid for 71% of the nation's food imports before 2021. But now that tea production has crashed 20%, the the ban on fertilizer essentially destroyed the ability for Sri Lanka to pay for things that it imported. So you can see
Mm.
how the green agenda, by forcing us to not use chemical fertilizer, completely screwed up an entire economy of Sri Lanka. But, Greta Thunberg can go to bed, cozy, knowing that Sri Lanka is now thoroughly green. Starving, but I mean, still green. So therefore, it's a risk she's willing to take.
Ramon, how dare you? But anyway, with that being said, the problem here is, and I'm going to bring my great expertise from my 400 hours on Farming Simulator 2022. My Farming Simulator PS4 game has clearly told me that if I want to maximize on farming production, then I need to put nitrogen on the fields. And the more nitrogen I put on there, obviously, the more fertile the fields are, and they give me a bigger crop. Also, some fields are naturally just not very good because the soil quality has eroded over time, usually through over farming. And by putting extra fertilizer on it, you can take a field that would typically be unusable and basically make it usable. So obviously, the whole idea behind putting nitrogen on farms is that ultimately it increases the yield, so that you would have like 100% yield, not a 50% yield, and you can use fields that would generally be kind of unusable, and you can make them usable. So naturally, anybody that's with a brain cell or wants to achieve another trophy on PS4 knows that the obvious way to do it is that you have to use these in order to boost food production, and by not using it, you're basically going to halve your crop production, and you're also going to further reduce your crop production, because fields that you would otherwise plant on, you now can't plant on. Now that has a knock-on effect. The first is that farmer number one doesn't produce as much money for their yield. Remember, farming is very capital intensive, and obviously relies on that capital in order to be able to reinvest in the farm. The other thing is that you would have somebody who would own a piece of land, learn a living from that land, and they can't now because the land has now become unusable. So in my farming sim game, that basically means my game's over and I ran out of cash. But in the real world, it basically means proper people starving.
Yep.
So it's one thing to kind of play a game and play a politics. It's another thing when it's people's actual real life. And I think we're seeing the consequences of that right now in Sri Lanka.
Absolutely, and so the green agenda is just one aspect that caused the downfall. Sri Lanka went hugely into lockdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Lockdowns caused the tourism industry to crater
Fail.
and be destroyed. The tourism industry accounts for like 20% of GDP or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they went into lockdown, which was a lovely globalist thing to do. As lockdown eased, they banned chemical fertilizer. They prevented them from paying for any of the imports that the tourism budget of the previous year didn't account for. So you got this perfect storm of the Great Reset in all of its glory hitting Sri Lanka in one go. And people are like, oh, I'm so shocked and surprised that this is happening. It's not, you shouldn't be shocked or surprised. We're not Cyril Ramaphosa here. This is the natural
Mm.
consequences of following the sort of green agenda and the globalist agenda of the UN and the World Economic Forum. Like, these are the repercussions. You will own nothing and be happy. Well, these people own nothing and are very unhappy. Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought? Who knew that starving to death would actually, make people rather miserable and angry? And I suppose this kind of comes on to another article, and this is actually all part of the same thing. I know we found another article by the UN, which basically, I'm sure you can bring it up for the audience. It's the benefits of world hunger, which is in similar guise to the WEF's bullcrap. And wouldn't you know it, they basically turn around going, "Oh look, there's no food anywhere because the Green New Deal meant, oh, we don't actually produce that much food anymore." And oh yeah, war in Ukraine and Russia and the usual bull rubbish. So they're like, okay, well, what do we do? Well, what we do is we tell people, we know you're hungry, we know there's no food, but don't worry, there's benefits to it. It's a good thing. So now that it's all kind of come out and Sri Lanka's turned into a giant shit pot of public revolution, well, wouldn't you know it? The Klaus Schwab's the evil dictator of Sweden or Switzerland or whatever freaking Germanic country he comes from. They've apparently deleted the post off the WEF, trying to cover the tracks. They're like, no, we didn't say that we would turn this into a WEF model of our bullshit policies. And wouldn't you know it? The UN deleted their Article 2 on the benefits of world hunger because apparently world hunger isn't actually that much of a benefit. And would you know it, all the useful idiots that we love to talk about on this channel came out and in the legacy media, and would you know it, apparently, Ramon, the UN writes satirical articles now. And that wasn't a real article, it was actually comedy.
Yeah.
So I've always known that the UN was a giant shit show of comedy and that there was nothing that they said that was worthwhile. But what's your view on that? I mean, it's kind of a little bit stupid, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it is very weird because the UN does tend to create these articles that are completely against human nature. Especially one that says, world hunger might be beneficial because we do know that the core tenets of the environmental movement is shrinking the population. They want to depopulate the world. And that is what they say outright. That's why they don't want nuclear. They don't want energy for everyone. They want renewable energy for the select few. Mostly, if I may say, white people in Europe, Australia,
Oh,
and North
absolutely.
America. I mean,
Absolutely.
Africans can go starve to death. They don't give a fuck whatsoever. And that's why
Oh,
for
yeah.
them, world hunger is actually pretty great because it sort of weeds out the eugenics aspect of their ideology. Then when they get called out on it, all the fact checkers who are part of this very same elite that run the UN say, oh, no, it was just satire, guys. As if the United Nations ever did satire before. Apparently they did. No one knew about it. Not even the UN knew about it. But there you go.
Yep.
It was satirical, guys. Nothing to see here.
And I suppose the point and the reason we're raising this, I mean, obviously it's amazing to watch Sri Lanka get really, really annoyed and obviously storm everything that's government based. And I'll tell you what I like about the whole thing that we're seeing out of Sri Lanka. And the first is they're not targeting private enterprise; they're targeting the state. Everybody knows who is the purveyor of this bullcrap. They know it's the state. Storm Parliament, storm the president's house. And this has led to two things that have become vitally important that's worthwhile mentioning. The first is when they stormed the president's house, what do you think they found there? Oh, yeah, a shitload of cash, gold, and other stuff, so that he can flee to the Maldives. So, whilst he has starved his people, leading to untold generations of debt and starvation and people dying, that's okay. He's going to live a nice life in the Maldives. And this is what we keep seeing from all these tin pot dictators. The second thing, and the most important part about this, is it, and I wonder, Ramon, if you agree, is it sets a blueprint for the rest of the world, and most noticeably South Africa. Is this what we can expect to see in South Africa? Do you think we are going to get to a point where even the average small minded idiot understands the root problem in this country is the state? We're coming for you, the state. You better run. Do you think that might happen?
So it depends on a variety of factors. People react to fundamental change that happens quickly. In South Africa, we don't have change that happens quickly. It
Mm,
changes dramatically for a while, and then you get used to it. Like load shedding is
mm,
just a part of life. Higher fuel prices. If the fuel price went up 10 Rand a litre, yes. But it's going up 2 Rand a litre and might go down 50 cents next month. People are feeling it, but it's almost like a cancer more than an assault with a machete. You know, you're not being
Mm.
beheaded. You just have a little tumor growing, and you're aware that it's there, but it's not causing, life-threatening discomfort for you. But once again, South Africa is quite easily shocked by world events because we've got such a weak political system and economy. I have no doubt this could very well happen depending on the circumstances.
Mm. Yeah, let's wait to see what happens, man. Like, it's going to be a very interesting time in our country to see as the shit show continues. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's going to be
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, we need to pay attention to Kenya, Uganda, Angola, and Mozambique. A lot of protests are happening there due to inflation, due to the cost of fuel, due to the cost of food. And they are right next to us. Those are the countries that are our neighbors or very close to being our neighbors. So if that spreads, it'll be very interesting living in South Africa. But, we've been ready for this for the longest period of time. So get ready, buckle yourself in, get a gun, and yeah.
I remain of the opinion, folks, and I know some of you are going to be sitting there going, oh, that means we must immigrate. I remain of the opinion of two things. Number one, Africa is going to have the largest population growth within the next decade. This continent is where the future happens.
Yep.
Daily Wire, you know where we are. If you want to speak, we'll take the call. Yeah. Anyway, the other thing is that at least we still have freedoms on this continent that they don't have in Western Europe. Western Europe is being overrun by mass migration, and the problems are really kind of being localized now to Western Europe. But that's a population that's been disarmed, that has no ability to self-govern, and has been overtaken by decades of centralist ideas from socialist parties. We
Mm.
don't have that yet. And
Yep.
even if they try to enforce it, like the states are so inept that really what are they going to do? Like we've already covered it in other articles where the government can't even pitch to court on NHR things, like the most extreme bills of parliament going through out there, the most extreme policies. Like in Africa, we're just like, hey, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
and we don't care.
Yeah. I made a video quite a while ago that said, the Great Reset will be thwarted by ANC incompetence, and that's exactly what will be happening.
Correct.
And that exactly is what is happening right before our eyes. So, I'd rather live in a place without a Great Reset than one with one. And Africa is definitely the place to stay at to ensure the Great Reset doesn't happen. But anyway,
And
on
and
that
obviously Sri
bombshell,
Lanka shows us exactly what a great reset looks like in
yeah,
reality. So thanks, but not for us.
yeah, thanks, but no thanks. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Take it easy.
Cheers.
Bye.